Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight it is Friday, so we are thrilled to be able to open the show tonight with some rare good news. That doesn't happen very often, and when it does, we celebrate. One of the main problems with the U.S. government is that there's no way to know exactly what it's doing because you're not allowed to know. More than 1 billion federal documents, 1 billion, have been declared classified, and that means they're off limits to you and all other ordinary American citizens who don't work for the government. You're not allowed to see them, despite the fact they belong to you. Now, no matter what you may have heard, the point of the system is not to protect the country from foreign adversaries. Under the Biden administration, we don't even bother to do that anymore. No, the point of this system is to take power from the voters and the officials they elect and hand that power to the permanent bureaucracy in Washington. It's infuriating, and over time it is dangerous. But for once, we can report some meaningful pushback against this regime of secrecy and deceit. Kevin McCarthy of California became Speaker of the House last Friday. And in one of his first big policy changes, he is pledging to let Americans see, quote, all that happened at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. And that means finally releasing the roughly 14,000 hours of surveillance footage from that day that as of tonight remain hidden. Watch this.
Yeah, I think the public should see what has happened on day. I've watched what Nancy Pelosi did, where she politicized it, where for the first time in the history as a speaker, not allowing the minority to appoint to a committee, to pick and choose. We watched the politicization of this. I think the American public should actually see all what happened instead of a report that's written for a political basis. And I think the answer. We're looking through that. I want to be very thoughtful about it, but yes, I'm engaged to do that.
Well, yeah, after 2 full years, after a highly publicized and highly politicized congressional committee, after endless grandstanding in the media, after unprecedented political crackdowns, after nearly 1,000 arrests, after all of that, Americans, yes, they do have a right to know what actually happened on January 6th. That's what Kevin McCarthy said. Who could argue otherwise? What's the counter argument? Well, there is one, and Democrats have been making it in court, and that's why the footage from that day is still hidden. Here's an actual quote from an actual brief filed in an actual federal court by an actual left-wing U.S. attorney called Channing Phillips. Quote, national security interests could be harmed by the disclosure of the sealed CCTV videos from the Capitol. Once the capabilities of the U.S. Capitol interior surveillance camera, including its position and whether it pans, tilts, or zooms, is disclosed to the public via the release of a single video from that camera, the cat is out of the bag. So that's it right there. You can't know whether the Capitol's surveillance cameras pan, tilt, or zoom. And if you do know, America is in peril. It's completely absurd. Every human movement in the United States Capitol is recorded by cameras, and you already knew that because the same is true in virtually every public building in the Western Hemisphere. That is not a secret. And of course, it's not the secret the Democrats fear you might learn if you saw the tape. They're probably a lot more concerned about whether you'll discover how many law enforcement agents actively helped January 6 protesters enter the building that day. Some of them definitely did. We know that for a fact because we have the tape. Watch.
Police are squabbling with protesters. Oh, there we go. And they just breached the Capitol again.
So you saw the barricades come down in front of the Capitol. In some cases, it was not actually the police who took them down, but we still don't know the identity of the people who did. Why don't we? Well, Julie Kelly has just reported on a remarkable moment in the ongoing trial of a man called Richard Barnett. Barnett is the man photographed with his feet famously on Nancy Pelosi's desks on January 6th. Under cross-examination from Barnett's defense lawyer this week, a U.S. Capitol Police commander called Carlson Mendoza admitted that unidentified but apparently highly trained agent provocateurs were leading the crowd that day. Here's the exchange. The defense attorney asks, quote, would it be fair to say that at least some of the leading edges of that crowd, they contained bad people or provocateurs? Is that fair? Mendoza's response, quote, it's fair. Mendoza went on to confirm that these provocateurs were, quote, highly trained, violent people who work together and coordinate together. Well, that's a remarkable admission. But who were these people? Under oath, the director of the FBI has refused to deny that these provocateurs were working with federal law enforcement. Indeed, Christopher Wray of the FBI has refused to confirm or deny that FBI agents dressed as Trump supporters and breached the Capitol. Watch this.
Did you have confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters inside the Capitol on January the 6th prior to the doors being open?
Again, I had to be very careful.
It should be a no. Can you not tell the American people no? We did not have confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters positioned inside the Capitol.
Gentleman's time has expired.
You should not read anything into my decision not to share information.
Director Wray,
confidential human
gentleman's
sources.
time has expired.
Well, that's just completely outrageous. First, it seems very obvious the FBI did have confidential sources dressed as Trump supporters inside the Capitol. But the fact is, we as Americans have an absolute right to know. How many FBI agents or informants participated in the January 6 riots? Why can't we know? There's no good reason. FBI Director Christopher Wray wants to keep the surveillance footage hidden so we can't know. Again, the real secret here is not whether the cameras in the Capitol pan, tilt, or zoom. It's ridiculous. The real secret is what really happened there. So for 2 years, the Department of Justice has fought the release of this footage. But still, some of that footage has emerged. Take a look at this tape. It was obtained by BuzzFeed. It was released only after a federal judge rejected the DOJ's claim that this particular footage needed to stay secret on, quote, national security grounds. National security grounds. The footage covers a 15-minute period on January 6th from 2:25 p.m. to 2:40 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, that's right in the middle of the so-called insurrection. For context, 2:26 p.m. is around when Mike Pence, then the vice president, was evacuated from the Capitol. These are images from a surveillance camera at the Senate wing of the complex, and they show people calmly walking around taking pictures. Not much of a riot. Now, that's relevant because the DOJ is charging some of the people who entered the Capitol around this time, probably including some of the people in those frames, with endangering the safety of Mike Pence. They're saying the Capitol itself was a restricted area because Mike Pence was present. But it does not appear from that footage that it's true. Where exactly was Mike Pence at the time? People are doing jail time as a result of assumptions about that question. But the rest of us can't verify it because the surveillance footage is still classified for national security reasons. We should see it. That footage might also show when exactly Capitol police officers began CPR on Roseanne Boylan, one Trump supporter who died that day. And that would be important to know as well for her family and for the rest of us. We might also learn about why one Capitol Hill police officer on January 6th, a man called Khalid Johnson, was wearing a MAGA hat as he seemed to coordinate with some of the protesters. That footage was shot by journalist Ford Fisher. You're seeing an image of it on your screen right now. And maybe we'll learn more about the Chewbacca guy, the guy in the Viking hat, his activities during January 6th. He's the man now serving almost 4 years behind bars for declining a police officer's half-hearted request that he take the party elsewhere.
Hey, man. Glad to see you guys. You guys are patriots. Look at this guy. He's got covered in blood. God bless you.
Yes.
You good, sir? Do you need medical attention?
I'm good, thank you.
All right.
I got shot in the face. Where are they? I got shot in the face with some kind of plastic bullet.
Any chance I could get you guys to leave the Senate wing?
We will. I've been making sure they ain't disrespecting the place.
Okay, just want to let you guys know this is like the sacredest place.
More than half of all murders in the United States are not solved at this point because law enforcement, including federal law enforcement, can't get its act together sufficient to solve those murders. And that guy has had his life destroyed and is spending 41 months in prison. Why? Did he do something we're not aware of? The surveillance footage would show us and answer that question. But big picture, if you don't want another January 6th, if you want to avoid another riot like that, you'd want as much of the footage to come out as possible. Instead, our government has been using the information blackout it claims is necessary for national security in order to do what they usually do under the cover of classification law, and that's lie to us. Joe Biden just claimed on camera that right-wing insurrectionists, racists, killed a Capitol police officer called William Evans. William Evans, of course, was murdered at a checkpoint by a supporter of the Nation of Islam.
3 months after January 6th, while they're still cordoning off the Capitol because threats by these sick insurrectionists continue to be profligated on the internet. Again, all America saw what happened. What Officer Evans was killed defending the checkpoint you'd had to go through to get up to the Capitol because of these god-awful sick threats.
Evil thrives in secrecy. That used to be obvious to all Americans. We have a right to know, and moreover, transparency is the only solution. And it looks like we're going to get some. And that's thanks to the new Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, and to the small group of Republicans who pushed him in that direction. Matt Gaetz of Florida is one of them who joins us now. Congressman, thank you so much for coming on. How gratifying is it you didn't want Kevin McCarthy to be Speaker, you said it many times, he became Speaker, and now he's doing something that you've been calling for. How gratifying is this?
Bravo, Speaker McCarthy. This was not an agreement that we had at the beginning of last week, but as the week progressed, Speaker McCarthy, to his great credit, understood this was important to a great many of us. And when we get this 14,000 hours out, we're going to be able to see the extent to which the federal agents and assets that were present that day may or may not have increased the level of criminal acuity. We're going to be able to see their coordination with one another. And we're also going to be able to see if there's exculpatory evidence that would show that people never intended to violate a law, even though they might have been technically out of compliance with whatever the standard was at that time based on the vice president's movements that they probably weren't aware of anyway. It is interesting, though, that at every time from the JFK files to 9/11 to now January 6th, it's our own government, it's our own Department of Justice that seems to stand in the way of transparency. The Speaker of the House is now fulfilling the commitment he made to us, and he deserves a great deal of credit for it.
Amen. I feel the same way, and I had similar views about McCarthy to the ones you had, but I'm so thankful for this. Really quickly, we want to be fair. You serve in Congress. Can you think of any legitimate reason, real reason, tied to actual national security concerns to keep this footage secret?
No, I mean, we already know from whistleblower interviews that there were federal agents and assets that were on the grounds that day. And I think what they really want to do is protect those people. They don't want the answers to the questions about coordination, exculpation, criminal acuity. And I think that is what they are trying to preserve. Usually when the Department of Justice is standing in the way of disclosure, it is because they are trying to protect against embarrassment, not protect our safety.
It's self-protection.
Yes.
Not protecting the nation. Matt Gaetz, nicely put. Great to see you tonight. Thank you so much for this. Appreciate you coming on. So Joe Biden's staff discovered, and Joe Biden admitted, that he'd been storing classified documents in several occasions: his office, his garage near his Corvette, something called the Penn Biden Center. The White House physician just announced that as a result of a routine colonoscopy, they found more documents. Just kidding. Possible, though. But you have to kind of wonder, and we're waiting, by the way, for classified documents to be found at the swimming pool made famous by Corn Pop, but it's just a matter of time before that happens. What's weird is that the DOJ has not raided any of Joe Biden's properties, even though we've been told for many months now that these are very serious crimes. A civilian employee of the Department of Defense went to prison last year for taking a couple of classified documents to her hotel room. So you can see what happens to civilians or normal people when classified documents are, quote, mishandled. Buck Sexton has spent a lot of time around classified documents. He once was a CIA officer. He's now the host, thank heaven, of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show. He joins us tonight. Buck, thanks a lot for coming on. So, I mean, this was the world that you lived in, that you worked in. Assess the DOJ's response to what Biden did.
Well, if you were a normal person, which you were getting at before, who happened to work in the national security apparatus, you lived in constant fear of even the smallest infraction of classified protocols. I saw adults break down in tears because they thought they may have misplaced something even inside what was overall a classified facility. And certainly your career and perhaps even your freedom could be taken from you with even the most minute, even the smallest infraction. But as we know, a true tyranny isn't the strict enforcement of all laws. It is the disparate enforcement of laws. So that's been the case for the powerful and the everyday folks in national security all along. But now you have to add to that the Democrat layer and what we see here with Joe Biden, which is obviously a sense. The fact that he brought up that his Corvette was in the garage and it's locked. Tucker, if I had said that to security personnel at the CIA, don't worry about it, bro. I've got all the docs at home locked up in a safe or whatever in my own private residence. They would have taken my badge, told me my clearances were revoked, and I would probably be awaiting federal charges. Joe Biden thinks like, no big deal, man. I got a lot of money from the Penn Biden Center. People think I'm important. That's the situation we're seeing unfold, and people recognize how outrageous it is.
Well, yeah, and the document sat there for 6 years. I think there's more to the story. Just my guess. But Buck Sexton, thanks for the perspective.
Well, the big part of it, Tucker, is, who found it? Because everyone seems to be saying that they think this is an effort to push Biden aside. I want to know, look, it's not hard to get rid of a few documents here and there if they're classified. So the big question that we're still asking here is this just the meeting of tremendous Biden incompetence, which has, been going on for 40 plus years, with opportunism from within the national security apparatus to push him? That's what we want to know.
I think this is make way for Michelle. Just my view. Not provable. We'll see. Buck Sexton, great to see you tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
So the Biden administration has been actively encouraging Americans, young people, to smoke more weed and meth. They're sending crack pipes to crack addicts. But one Republican member of Congress wants to burn a cigar in his office, and liberals are hysterical. We'll speak to him. Striking a blow for freedom. Plus, it turns out arming Ukraine is not just a bad idea. It's actually an active threat to our own national security. The U.S. military is running out of weapons to defend ourselves. Not a guess. Details ahead. So when the first Pfizer COVID shot came out, if you listened carefully, you understood that Pfizer understood that the company had no idea what the long-term consequences of the drug might be. And some people piped up and said, wait a second, what are the long-term effects? Shut up, anti-vax, anti-science person. Well, it was worth asking those questions because in the months since, we have learned that that shot causes heart inflammation in young people, which can be deadly, as well as decreased sperm counts. And then today, just hours ago, the CDC says its vaccine safety data link, which tracks vaccine injuries, has identified a new link between Pfizer's new booster COVID shot and strokes in people over the age of 65. The CDC reports that its data, quote, raised a question of whether people over the age of 65 were, quote, more likely to have a stroke in the 21 days following vaccination compared with days 22 to 44 following a vaccination. An investigation is now underway. There's a lot going on with the nation's health. People have an awful lot of questions about it. There's a huge amount of lying around it. We're trying to separate fact from fiction. We'll bring you what we know on Monday. So what's interesting is that for the past 2 years, the Biden administration has been actively encouraging drug use among Americans, not just weed. There are dispensaries on every corner in every town in the country all of a sudden. Some people are getting rich from it. Smoke more weed. It's good for you. But also meth and crack. The Biden administration has literally sent crack pipes to crack addicts, something we never thought would happen. But they're doing it. On the other side, you have Republicans. They're back in control of the House of Representatives. And because they are, on the House side, Republican members who want to smoke tobacco once again can. They couldn't when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker because she had banned tobacco smoking in the Capitol complex back in 2007. Now, you'd think this would be non-controversial in a country where you're allowed to smoke meth in a park. Kids are encouraged to smoke weed. But it's very controversial because unlike meth and weed and crack, tobacco is bad. Several members of the Capitol Press Gallery are horrified by this, and they're complaining. So you have to kind of wonder, why is tobacco so dangerous? Well, we thought we would ask a member of Congress who uses it, who smokes an occasional cigar. Troy Nehls joins us tonight. Congressman, grateful that you're here, willing to stand up for the most American of all pleasures, which is tobacco. Sorry to say it, it's true, it founded the country. Tell us why it's important for you to burn a cigar occasionally in your office.
Well, thank you for having me, Tucker. It's all about freedom. It's interesting that dishonest media and those they want to complain about a little smoke coming out of my cigar, they don't want to talk about the inflation or the crime or the southern border. And people have been enjoying cigars. Nations leaders, world leaders, from Winston Churchill to United States presidents, from Andrew Jackson to Theodore Roosevelt, Nixon, JFK, they like smoking their cigars. We even know that Bill Clinton, he enjoyed a good cigar every once in a while. So I don't know what all the hoopla is all about. You're right. In 2007, under Pelosi, she said you cannot smoke cigars in the Capitol building, i.e. you can't smoke cigars on the House floor or in committee hearings. But it did not include members' offices. So a member's house office, we've always been able to smoke cigars. There are many of us in the cigar caucus, about 30 of us, that enjoy a good cigar in our office, and we do so. Nancy Pelosi, for 2 years, I've been smoking cigars. Nobody complains about it. But now they want to come after us because we're in the majority. This is typical from the left. They want to infringe on our rights. They want to complain about our smoke. They're probably complaining about maybe my aftershave or the color of my tie. It doesn't end.
But if you were smoking weed or meth, no one would say anything. What is it about tobacco, which was a religious sacrament for the American Indians, for all the Mesoamerican Indians? What is it about tobacco that triggers them so profoundly, do you think?
I don't know. Maybe they've never tried one, but you look at a nice Ashton cigar. It's a beautiful cigar. It's mild, mate Arturo Fuento. It's a great cigar. Try one.
Oh, I have. Congressman Troy Nehls, striking a blow for freedom. That is the smell of freedom. We appreciate your coming on tonight and standing up for Americanism.
Thank you. God bless.
Great to see you. Well, Joe Biden has just announced that we're going to, against our own interests, send missile batteries, armored vehicles, and a whole lot more to Ukraine forever. So, against our interests, well, that may be an understatement. We may be disarming our own country by doing this. A reporter just asked the Secretary of the Navy, Carlos del Toro, whether the military, quote, might get to the point where it has to make the decision whether it needs to arm itself or Ukraine. Del Toro did not blow off the question. He answered it this way, yeah. That's always been a concern for us. That's where we are. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis is a senior fellow at Defense Priorities and joins us tonight to assess. Sure appreciate your coming on. So this is it seems to me, as a civilian, a pretty serious admission by the Secretary that we're disarming ourselves on behalf of Ukraine.
Well, it is. And, you know, this really underscores what is, to me, a really big problem with this whole situation, to where the administration doesn't appear to really have a strategy or even an idea what it's trying to do, what it's trying to accomplish on the ground in Ukraine. Well, I mean, we've sent HIMARS, we've sent some of the Patriots, we've now putting in the Bradleys, potentially strikers, M109 Paladins. I mean, the numbers just keep going on. And look, this is not fat. This is not some of the older stuff like we gave them at the beginning. Now you're getting into the bone, and the question's going to be, how long are you going to do this? How much are you going to give away? And what's going to happen when we start getting into really putting our security at risk? And here's something I really want to raise, Tucker, which hasn't been even addressed by the administration so far, is that after this probable winter offensive that Russia's potentially days or weeks away from launching, no matter how it goes, whether Russia has a big success or whether the Ukraine side comes in, you can be sure that other people are going to say, hey, man, we gave them all this stuff, but now then Russia's winning, so we have to give them even more to stave off victory. Well, exactly. Or they'll say, oh, no, the Ukraine's doing good. Now we've got to give them even more so they can keep going. The bottom line is that there's always going to be asked for more. And at some point, our interests have to enter into the conversation. And so far, they haven't.
No, they haven't. And really quick, I mean, Ukraine, when I checked this morning, is in Europe. So where are the European nations? Why is this the sole duty of the United States? Where's Germany and Great Britain and all the other freedom fighters in Europe?
Yeah, that's a big issue that I've also, very near and dear to our heart here at Defense Priorities, because, look, we want to shift some of this burden where it belongs to the people who have the most at stake. It can't be America's primary responsibility to do these things. And, and you do have that. That's exactly what people are asking. And at some point, we have to change that.
Yeah, it seems like lunacy from the outside. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis of Defense Priorities, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So we've repeatedly brought you updates on the saga of the Canadian school board that was protecting the shop teacher who was showing up and involving his kids in his giant prosthetic breast fetish. Well, there's another update on that story, and it seems like a good one. That's next.
And welcome to Fox News Live. I'm Trace Gallagher in Los Angeles. Search and rescue efforts are underway after a tornado-spawning storm system ripped through the South. The violent weather is blamed for at least 9 deaths in Alabama and Georgia, but that number is expected to rise. There are reports of damage in at least 14 counties, with the storm flipping mobile homes, tearing off roofs, even derailing a freight train. Lisa Marie Presley, the only child of Elvis, will be buried next to her son at Graceland. The mansion, once the home of her father, has become a gathering place for fans who are distraught over Lisa Marie's death. Elvis and other members of the Presley family are also buried there. Lisa Marie died yesterday shortly after being rushed to the hospital. She was 54 years old. I'm Trace Gallagher. I'll see you back here tonight. Fox News at Night, America's late news. Now back to Tucker Carlson tonight.
You doubtless remember the Canadian shop teacher who decided to pull the kids in his class into his weird sexual fetishes. The teacher goes by the name of Kayla Lemieux, showed up in enormous fake prosthetic breasts and wagged them at the kids. And for months, the cowardly school board in Ontario, that'd be the Halton District School Board, defended this creep. But now, under pressure, including the threat of legal action from parents, they appear to be backing down a little bit. The school board says it will require a professional dress code from teachers, meaning smaller prosthetic breasts, apparently. Well, the Canadian media ignored this story. Rebel News did not. Its reporter David Menzies has been on it from the very beginning. He joins us tonight. David, thanks so much for coming on. You look great, by the way.
Well, Tucker, on network TV, as they say, give them the jiggle with the giggle, right?
That is 100%. And look, as long as you feel empowered, we're for it. But tell us, how, since you are wearing the costume of the shop teacher in Ontario, I mean, how could you teach shop class wearing those things? I guess just a core competency first.
Tucker, you could not. In fact, I've always said, forget about the Ministry of Education. Where's the Ministry of Labor? Long sleeves, long hair, not done up in a bun or a hairnet, jewelry. Busty Lemieux breaks every shop etiquette rule in the book. And by the way, just in case your audience thinks I've attached myself to some kind of fetish lifestyle or I'm a drag queen storyteller for hire, no, that's not the case. I went there to the Halton District School Board back in October, dressed exactly like Busty Lemieux, the sheer blouse with the nipples protruding, the blonde hair, the bicycle shorts. And here's the thing about the hypocrisy of the Halton District School Board, Tucker. They're all down with the radical transgender agenda, but only when it's in front of the kids. When it's in front of their school board meeting, they actually fled the room, and I have subsequently been banned for life, Tucker, from Halton District School Board headquarters and all their schools because I guess I was asking impolite questions and they don't like the idea of drag when it comes to them. Now, the news, Tucker, is that earlier this month, the HDSB trustees approved a request to the education director. His name is Curtis Innes, he, him. And what they want to do is craft a professionalism policy to maintain appropriate and professional standards of dress in the classroom. Now, maybe you and your viewers are saying, wait a minute, isn't this deja vu all over again? Didn't they look into this back in November? And yes, they did. And it was rejected in November by Sari Taha, who is their human resources superintendent. So 2 things here, Tucker. What would change from November until March? I don't think anything has. And also that director of education, Curtis Innes, he released a statement where he essentially said that he might veto a dress code recommendation, that they will continue to be, answerable to human rights, equity, et cetera, et cetera. So the HDSB is kind of like professional wrestling. Nothing is real until it happens.
I don't know what's going on up there. We're going to have to visit your country sometime soon just to check it out. And I have to say, I'm a little bit sympathetic to the school board because I am intimidated by your prosthetic breasts and may need to flee. But I appreciate your coming on. Anyway, David Menzies, thank you, of Rebel News.
My pleasure, Tucker. Thank you.
Just in case you have any faith remaining in higher education in this country, we've got a video that may destroy it. It's from an event in 2019 at Western Washington University.
What about folks who have wombs but are not women, like trans people, genderqueer folks? Why do you keep saying women when this issue affects more than women?
Because there are 2 genders, male and female.
Aren't. This issue affects more than women. It affects trans men. It affects genderqueer folks.
Women have wombs.
I am not a woman, and I have a womb.
You are a woman.
I know. No.
Next question.
So after that event, crazed Khmer Rouge student activists torched pro-life posters on campus because they can do whatever they want. Even though video is from 2019, it is circulating on social media even now. So we wanted to track down the speaker in that clip. Her name is Kristen Hawkins. She is the president of Students for Life of America and Students for Life Action. She joins us tonight. Kristen, thanks so much for coming on. So what was it? That seemed like a perfectly reasonable statement. What was the reaction to it?
The sad fact is, Tucker, it doesn't matter if I'm at an Ivy League institution like Harvard or at a state university there at Western Washington. The most controversial thing I can say now is not that we should end the violence of abortion, but that there's only 2 genders, and that if you don't want to face an unexpected pregnancy, you can choose not to engage in heterosexual sex. This is basic grade school biology that the party of science just flat out denies. And to be honest with you, this is why I need your viewers, Tucker, to go to studentsforlife.org. Help us continue to get on campuses to educate this generation about what their bodies are, but now with bodyguards, as you saw in that clip, because the violence, the threats only continue, the protests from Antifa, it only has gotten worse since that video.
I think they know it's a lie, and that's why they're hysterical. I mean, if you're confident in what you're saying, of course, you don't need to set fire to other people's posters, do you? Probably not. Kristen Hawkins, I appreciate your coming on tonight. It's a great video. Thank you. So green energy is going to save the world. Well, actually, it's destroying the world. And the whales are dying first. They're dying all across the East Coast because of green energy projects. Of course, the government won't admit that. They're blaming fishermen and lobstermen. We're going to speak to someone who knows the truth about what's happening. You won't believe the cost of these projects. Next. So right now as we speak, the federal government is harassing the people who need the least harassment, commercial fishermen and lobstermen on the East Coast. They're saying that fishermen and lobstermen are somehow imperiling the whales, but that's not true. The government's offshore wind projects, which are enriching their donors, are killing a huge number of whales right now. 7 dead whales washed up on the Jersey Shore in just the past month. A humpback whale washed up today. The fishing industry saw this coming. They've been fighting the construction of offshore wind turbines for years. But many local governments, of course they're all getting paid, are pushing ahead anyway. Megan Lapp is the fisheries liaison at Seafreeze, which harvests fish and squid. She joins us tonight. Megan, thanks so much for coming on. So commercial fishing has been going on since the beginning of time. It's in the Bible. Wind farms are brand new. You're seeing a huge increase in the death of whales. How is the government claiming it's your fault?
Well, actually, so right now the government is not claiming that it's anybody's fault. I can't authoritatively say that all the whales that are washing up are because of offshore wind farms. But what I can tell you is that the 7 whales that have washed up off of New Jersey in the past month have all washed up during intense geotechnical surveying of wind farm leases off of New Jersey. And on the East Coast, there has been an unusual mortality event for humpback whales from 2016 until now. And the only thing that has changed in the ocean in that time is the fact that there have been offshore wind surveys occurring from 2015 until now. And now magically, there's a bunch of humpback whales dying. There's also been an unusual mortality event for minke whales from 2017 until now. And again, the only thing that has changed in the ocean is the surveying activities that have been going on for offshore wind farms, which are essentially carpet bombing the ocean floor with intense sound.
So, and of course, whales use sound to navigate. And so why wouldn't that be affecting whales or killing them? I don't understand. I mean, you're applying the principles of science. Let's take a look at this as objectively as you can, assess what's changed, and try and find out what's causing it. There are all kinds of fisheries biologists who are paid by the federal government to figure this stuff out. Where are they?
That's a very good question, Tucker, a very good question. You know, there are a lot of people right now that are calling for the complete cessation of these offshore wind farm surveys until there can be an in-depth investigation. There absolutely should be. NOAA's Office of Protected Resources that oversees, you know, the population of whales in U.S. waters, they need to take a very hard look at this. We know that intense sound can cause bleeding in the eardrums of whales and lesions in their ears. Now all of a sudden you have offshore wind farm surveys, you see them stranding on the beaches. There's a lot that's not being reported. In November, there were like 6 pilot whales that washed up on Cape Cod. 5 of them died. Nobody's reporting on this. Nobody is looking at this with a critical eye. And really and truly, there needs to be a suspension of these surveys until somebody can do an in-depth investigation.
Yeah, this is the DDT of our times. Where all the liberals used to care about whales and the environment and the oceans and the land, the natural environment, they're all gone or taking money from green energy. Megan Lapp, I appreciate your coming on and for telling the truth.
Thank you. Thank you, Tucker.
So if you recognize Megan Lapp, it's because she was in our documentary on wind turbines called Blown Away, The People versus Wind Power. Absolutely worth watching. That's the future unless we stand up. You can screen it right now on Fox Nation. So Wells Fargo used to be the biggest mortgage lender in the United States. Now they're downsizing. Instead of offering mortgages to everyone, they're going to focus instead on giving mortgages to, quote, individuals and families in minority communities. In other words, not lending money to white people. Is that illegal? The journalist and filmmaker Chris Rufo has been on this story. We should tell you that Governor DeSantis of Florida has appointed Rufo to the board of trustees at the new College of Florida in an effort to end the ideological rot there. Chris Rufo joins us now. Chris, thanks so much for coming on. This is another one of those stories that you feel like this has to be too far. Tell us what you know about it.
Well, what we're seeing is the emergence of 2 separate standards based on race and the disappearance of this idea that everyone should be treated equally under the law and then judged according to the behavior. I think it's important for conservatives to understand that these programs are not simply a hypocrisy or kind of 2 sides of a same standard. They're actually entirely different standards. We're creating a moral basis based on identity that is seeking to supplant or replace a moral basis on behavior. And these companies are just following the lead of the academics, the universities, the activists on the left. And they're saying we're going to not judge people on their financial solvency or reliability, but on the basis of a racial revenge narrative. And they're saying simply, we're going now to judge you on the basis of race. It's illegal, but in so many cases, they're getting away with it.
But I don't understand. I mean, redlining was the original sin, we've been told, for 50 years of the mortgage industry, right? Deciding we're not going to lend to areas because a certain race of people live in them. And that's exactly what Wells Fargo is doing. Why doesn't the federal government shut down Wells Fargo with armed agents tonight? I don't understand how this can happen.
Because, Tucker, this is the basis of so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is not a simple colorblind equality represented in the 14th Amendment or the Civil Rights Act. It's an entirely new philosophy. It's based on critical race theory, and it's this idea that we should treat people differently based on race. And as long as we have the right racial hierarchy embedded in that philosophy, you can do essentially whatever you want. They're not doing anything different in the Biden administration because this is part and parcel of the ideology that they've adopted.
But when Wells Fargo announces we're not writing mortgages for white people and there's not some sort of mass response, you got to wonder, like, what is going on here? Chris Rufo, I sure appreciate your coming on and bringing us that story, and congrats on your appointment to the board of that college in Florida. Thank you. We'll be right back. We are out of time for the evening, for the hour, and for the week, but we'll be back on Monday night, 8 p.m., the show that's the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. Have the best weekend with the ones you love. We'll see you refreshed on Monday.